I'm Anil Kumar, and in this series of rearranging and working with formulas, we will understand how to solve quadratic functions. In general, a quadratic function is written as y equals to ax squared plus bx plus c. Now that is a standard form of a quadratic function. Now in many cases we could have sometimes b as 0, sometimes c as 0. Depending on that, we get different forms of the equation, right? Now, y values could be anything. When we say solve for a quadratic function, in that case specifically, we treat y as 0. So remember one thing, if I say solve equation, then it means really y equals to 0 by default. So we don't say find the value of the function when it is 0. When we say solve the equation and the equation is given to us, it is understood that we have to make the y value as 0. At times, we will also call this as find x-intercepts, right? So we can say find x-intercepts when relation to graph, right? So if we draw the graph, in this case, which is going to be a parabola, we may say find x-intercepts. That's also kind of solving the quadratic function. So these statements could be used many times, and general meaning of these statements is equate y equals to 0. Find the solution means find the value of x which will make this function 0. So that is what we really mean. And by default, we take real numbers as our domain, right? Now, we could have quadratic equations, as I said, in many different forms. In this particular video, we will see how to solve these quadratic functions. Let me take very simple example. For example, I could have x squared minus 4 equals to 0. Now that is a quadratic function where b is 0. So I have the first term and the last term. A is 1 for me in this particular case. Now to solve this equation, I can adopt two methods. One method could be I could factor and solve. The other could be I could just take 4 to the other side and do square root. So let me use both the methods. So first method for me will be to just take 4 on the other side, find the square root and get the answer. So if I do that, we get x squared equals to 4 and x is equals to square root of 4. I'm making a mistake here. Now some of you know what the mistake is, but well, think about it. What is the mistake here? Okay, that's also a good review, right? The other alternate way is to factor. Now it could be factored as x plus 2 times x minus 2, and then we have 0 on the right side. Now that is factoring, where we use the skills of factoring difference of squares. So it is basically, you could have written this expression as x squared minus 2 squared. So whenever it is difference of squares, you could write it as product of their sum and difference. So we use that property of factoring and factor it quickly. Now in this particular case, to get 0, we have to equate each factor to 0. So we could get x plus 2 equals to 0. That will give us x equals to minus 2. Or we could do x minus 2 equals to 0. That will give us x equals to 2. So we get two solutions. Do you get it? We get two solutions as plus and minus 2. If I write x equals to square root 4 here, you understand now what the mistake is. So whenever you're working with quadratic equations, remember, square root, whenever you do, write plus and minus. It is kind of very, very important, right? So once you do that, you of course get the same answer as expected. You should get plus and minus 2 as your answer. So that is the solution for a quadratic equation which could be factored and where b is 0, which has two terms. Now for your practice, I can write few equations here, and let us say we write x squared minus 9, and solving means equals to 0. Remember one thing, not all equations will have solution, correct? For example, if I give you equation as x squared plus 1 equals to 0, and what we're talking about is x belongs to real numbers, okay? We're not talking about complex numbers in this particular video. Now in that domain, this equation may not have any solution. Since, if I take 1 on this side, then I get x equals to minus 1, and then I square root it, and of course I'll write plus and minus, but that is square root of negative number, not possible, right? So in this case, no solution, right? So we have no solution. So there are times when you may not have solution to a quadratic function in the domain where we're talking about real numbers, right? So this one is a question for you. You can apply both the techniques and solve this particular question, right? Now this is one way of looking into it. The other way is you could, now I'll talk about is a very extensive way of doing things. Let's talk about factoring in bit more details, right? So let us say that if I have equation which is, let us say, x squared plus let me write a number here first. Let's say 12. Now 12 could be product of 4 and 3. 4 times 3 is 12. So if I write 7 here, I could factor this equation, right? So I got equation, I need to solve this equation. So we use sum and product to solve this. I'll provide you with a link which will help you to review your factoring skills. So, well, I made up an equation which is easier for me to solve. Product of two numbers is 12 and their sum is 7. Though two numbers are 4 and 3. So I could write this as x plus 4 times x plus 3, right? And so we get 0 here. Now to solve this really means that I could do x equals to minus 4. That will make this term 0. So that is one solution. Or I could do x equals to minus 3. That will make that term 0. And so both are the solutions for this particular equation, correct? So that is how you can solve a quadratic function. Now, at times, it may not be so simple to factor. Now, if you have an equation which cannot be factored so easily, let me now write x squared plus, instead of 6, let me make this as 6, right? Now, I'll write a number here which, 1. So that is simple for me. I know only 1 times 1 is 1. If I add 2 ones, I get only 2. So definitely, I'm not going to get 6. Correct. Now, how to solve such an equation? That is a big question. Now, to solve this equation, you could use quadratic formula. That is one way of doing it. Okay. So you could use quadratic formula. So what is the quadratic formula? Quadratic formula is x equals to minus b plus minus square root of b square minus 4ac divided by 2 times a, where a, b, c is, the coefficients of x square, x, and constant. In this case, a is 1, b is 6, and c is 1, right? Now, that is the way you could solve it. But I'll show you another method of solving it, and we call it completing the squares and then solving. So we'll learn two methods now. One, we have already done straight solution, factoring skills, and now completing the squares. So to complete the squares, what we are going to do is, we are going to rewrite this equation, x squared plus 6x, half of 6 is 3. So we add and subtract 3 squares. So that is the technique, right? Plus 1, and we'll see when will it be 0. Now first 3 terms form a perfect square. I mean to say, you could write this as x plus 3 whole square, and we have minus 3 is minus 9 plus 1 equals to 0, and then we get x plus 3 whole square minus 8 equals to 0, correct? Now we can solve this. It is still not so easy. I have seen students even struggling at this stage. How are you going to solve this equation? Now this equation is kind of a vertex form, right? We call it a vertex form of quadratic equation. It helps you to sketch a parabola. So we are kind of reviewing the skills. It's good to know all this. Okay, now how to solve for x? That's the prime ratio. We'll take 8 to the other side, so we get x plus 3 whole square equals to 8. Now we can square root, so we get x plus 3 equals to plus minus, don't forget that, of 8, and we can take 3 on this side, so we get x equals to minus 3 plus minus square root of 8. So that becomes the solution for the given equation. Well, you could have got the same solution by substituting a, b, c in this equation. Correct? Anyway, what we learn here is that if an equation is given in standard form and you want to find a solution, you have to complete squares and then rearrange the formula as I did to solve it, in case you're not using the quadratic equation. Or you could straight away apply the values and use a quadratic equation to solve it, right? I hope that helps. Now, this quadratic formula, which I wrote in the form of vertex form, helps you to even find more characteristics of the quadratic function. One of them is to find maximum or minimum value. Since the coefficient is positive, your parabola is going to open upwards. So at the vertex, in this particular case, the vertex is at minus 3 and the minimum value is minus 8. So that is going to be the minimum value for this particular parabola. At times, that could be the question for you to solve. Find the minimum value of the parabola represented by the given equation. In that case, you have to follow this method, and the method of applying the quadratic formula may not work for you. So it's good and handy to know these skills. I hope it really helps you to recall and recollect all what you had learned long time back and make you ready for whatever maths course you have taken now. Thank you and all the best.